Chapter 16, National Security, Part 1. The Security Services and National Security Council, Security Services, 282. The security services of the Gambia shall include A. The Gambia Armed Forces, B. The Gambia Police Force, C. The Gambia Immigration Service, D. The Gambia Fire and Rescue Service, E. The Gambia Prison Service, F. The State Intelligence Service, G. The Gambia Revenue Authority, H. The Drug Law Enforcement Agency, and I. Such other security service as may be established by an act of the National Assembly. National Security Council. There is established the National Security Council, which shall comprise A. The President as chairperson, B. The Vice President, who may deputize in the absence and on the direction of the President, C. The Ministers responsible for defense, internal security, foreign affairs, and justice, D. The Chief of Defense Staff, E. The Inspector General of Police, F. The Director General of the State Intelligence Service, G. The Director General of the Gambia Immigration Service, H. The Commissioner General of the Gambia Revenue Authority, I. The Director General of Prisons, J. The Chief Fire Officer, K. The Director General of the Drug Law Enforcement Agency, and L. The National Security Advisor to the President. 2. The National Security Council shall be responsible for advising the President, A. On all matters relating to the security of the Gambia, including measures necessary to keep the peace and security of the nation, B. On the integration of domestic and foreign policies relating to the security of the Gambia, C. On reforms that may be necessary to ensure and maintain a harmonized national security service to strengthen law enforcement in the Gambia, and D. On measures that are necessary to ensure a well-trained and professional national security system that is effectively responsive to threats to and the protection of the Gambia. 3. Under the direction of the President, the National Security Council shall take appropriate measures to safeguard the internal and external security of the Gambia and ensure the cooperation of the departments and agencies of the government in that regard. Part 2, Armed Forces, the Gambia Armed Forces, 284-1. There is established the Armed Forces of the Gambia, which shall be under the authority and direction of the President. 2. The Armed Forces shall consist of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Forces, and such other services for which provision is made by an act of the National Assembly. 3. Subject to subsection 1, the Chief of Defense Staff shall be responsible for the operational control and administration of the armed forces. 4. No person or authority shall raise an armed force except by or under the authority of an act of the National Assembly. 5. The President shall not deploy any troops outside the Gambia without the approval of the National Assembly. 6. The armed forces shall be equipped and maintained to perform their role of defense of the Gambia, as well as such other functions for the development of the Gambia as provided in this Constitution or any other law. 7. An act of the National Assembly shall make provision, A. For the functions and duties of the armed forces, B. Outlining the internal structures and commands of the armed forces, C. For the establishment of an Armed Forces Council, including its composition, functions, and all other related matters, D. Subject to Section 285 for the appointment, discipline, and removal of members of the armed forces, and E. For such other matters as may be considered necessary to maintain an efficient, effective, and disciplined armed forces. Appointments in armed forces. 285-1. The President shall, after consulting the National Security Council, appoint A, the Chief of Defense Staff of the Armed Forces, B, the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, and C, the commanders of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. 2. A person shall not be qualified for appointment in accordance with subsection 1 if he or she, A, is not a citizen of the Gambia, B, holds the citizenship or nationality of any other country, or C, is not a person of high moral character and proven integrity. 3. The President may, after consulting the National Security Council, remove from office the Chief of Defense Staff, the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, or the Commander of the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force. 4. An act of the National Assembly shall make provision: A, for appointment by President of commanders of any formation or unit of the armed forces. B, for the grant by the President of commissions in the armed forces. And C, to otherwise give full effect to this part. Part 3, the police force. The Gambia Police Force. 286. 1. There is established the Gambia Police Force. 2. The Gambia Police Force is a national service institution and shall function throughout the Gambia. Objects and functions of the Gambia Police Force. 287. The Gambia Police Force shall: A, strive for the highest standards of professionalism and discipline among its members. B, prevent corruption and promote and practice discipline, transparency, and accountability. C, have utmost respect for the rule of law, which shall at all times guide the execution of its duties and responsibilities. D, comply with standards of human rights and fundamental freedoms and respect for human dignity. E, train staff to the highest standards of competence and integrity. And F, foster and promote harmonious relationships with the broader Gambian society. Head of the Gambia Police Force. 288. 1. There is established the Office of Inspector General of Police, which shall be a public office in the security service. 2. The Inspector General of Police shall be the head of the Gambia Police Force, appointed by the President with the advice of the National Security Council, subject to confirmation by the National Assembly. 3. The Inspector General of Police shall exercise independent command over the Gambia Police Force and perform any other functions prescribed by an act of the National Assembly. 4. The Minister responsible for internal security may only give direction to the Inspector General of Police with respect to matters of policy for the Gambia Police Force, but no person may give any direction to the Inspector General of Police with respect to: A, the investigation of any particular offence or offences; B, the enforcement of the law against any particular person or persons; or C, the employment, assignment, promotion, suspension, or dismissal of any member of the Gambia Police Force. 5. Any direction given to the Inspector General of Police by the Minister responsible for internal security under subsection 4 shall be in writing. Removal from office. 289. The Inspector General of Police may be removed from office by the President on the advice of the National Security Council, subject to the approval of the National Assembly only on the ground of: A, serious violation of this Constitution or any other law, including a contravention of Chapter 6; B, gross misconduct, whether in the performance of his or her functions or otherwise; C, inability to perform the functions of his or her office, whether arising from infirmity of body or mind or from any other cause; or D, bankruptcy or entering into an arrangement with creditors. Part 4. National Security Service Commission. Establishment of the National Security Service Commission. 290. 1. There is established the National Security Service Commission. 2. The National Security Service Commission shall comprise: A, a person who is or is qualified to be appointed as a judge of the High Court as chairperson; B, 3 persons with high moral character and proven integrity who have served the public with distinction. C. The Inspector General of Police. D. The Chief Fire and Rescue Officer. E. The Director General of the Prison Service. And F. The Director General of the Immigration Service. 3. The members of the National Security Service Commission shall be appointed by the President after consultation with the National Security Council. Functions and powers of the National Security Service Commission. 291. The National Security Service Commission shall A. Recruit and appoint persons to hold or act in offices in the service, confirm appointments, and determine promotions and transfers within 1. The Gambia Police Force. 2. The Gambia Immigration Service. 3. The Gambia Fire and Rescue Service. And 4. The Prison Service. B. Observing due process, exercise disciplinary control over and remove persons holding or acting in offices within its jurisdiction. And C. Perform any other functions prescribed by an act of the National Assembly. Qualifications and disqualifications. 292.1. A member of the National Security Service Commission shall be a person who A. is a citizen of the Gambia, B. is a fit and proper person with knowledge of or experience in law enforcement, legal or judicial service, administration, management, or the provision of security services, and C. is of high moral character and proven integrity. 2. A person shall not be qualified to be appointed a member of the National Security Service Commission if he or she A. Unless an ex officio member is a member of the public service or a member of a disciplined force. B. Is a member of the National Assembly or any other elective body. C. Is a member of the governing body of a statutory body or state-owned enterprise. D. Is an office holder in or member of the executive body of a political party. E. Has, within the 2 years preceding his or her appointment, been nominated as a candidate in an election to the National Assembly. Or F. Is otherwise disqualified from holding an office in the public service. 3. A member of the National Security Service Commission is disqualified for appointment to any office in the security service of the Gambia during a period of 3 years after he or she ceases to be a member of the Commission. Tenure, independence, and removal of security service commissioners. 293.1. Subject to subsection 3, the members of the National Security Service Commission shall be appointed for a term of 3 years, subject to renewal for 1 more term. 2. In the exercise of its functions, the National Security Service Commission shall be independent and shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority, except that it shall take into account government policy relating to the security service sector. 3. The provisions of 216 shall apply with respect to the removal from office of a non-ex officio member of the Commission. Chapter 17. National Youth Development. Principles of Youth Development. 294.1. The youth are an important asset in the national development of the Gambia and shall be factored in all affairs of state policy to ensure their development and effective participation in nation building. 2. The following principles apply in relation to youth development and participation in nation building. A. The state is, among other things, built on the strength, ability, competence, professionalism, and capacity of its people, of which the youth are an important constituency. B. The youth shall be adequately trained for public life in order to engender in them the national values and principles set out in this Constitution and any act of the National Assembly, and prepare them to conduct themselves professionally and ethically. C. Youth participation and inclusion in essential building and fostering national unity, cohesion, peace, patriotism, and service to the people. D. The youth shall be afforded opportunities to serve their country on the principle of equality, commitment, service to state, non-discrimination, in brackets, whether as to language, ethnicity, background, or otherwise, and love for nation. And E, every support shall be provided to the youth to enable them to develop and realize their full potential. 3. An act of the National Assembly may provide further principles as it may consider necessary to strengthen the development of the youths of the Gambia. Obligations of the state to the youth. 295.1. The government shall, within 3 years of the coming into force of this Constitution, A, establish such schemes and institutions that will further the training and development of the youth. B, strengthen any existing scheme or institution related to the youth to facilitate the overall development of the youth. And C, provide adequate funding to realize the matters specified in paragraphs A and B. 2. The matters specified under subsection 1 shall be provided on an ongoing basis. 3. The state shall promote and protect the rights of the youth and shall take positive measures to eliminate policies and practices that may hinder the growth, development, and advancement of the youth. Consultation with the youth. 296. The government shall, in any matter concerning the development of policies and decision-making relating to or affecting the youth specifically, consult the youth to receive their opinions on such policies and decisions. Chapter 18. The National Council for Civic Education. Establishment and composition of National Council for Civic Education. 297. 1. There is established the National Council for Civic Education. 2. The National Council for Civic Education shall comprise a chairperson and 4 other members appointed by the President, subject to confirmation by the National Assembly. Qualifications and disqualifications. 298. The qualifications and disqualifications mentioned in section 275, 1 and 2 apply to the members of the Council. Functions of the Council. 299. 1. The functions of the National Council for Civic Education include: A, to create and sustain within society an awareness of the principles and objectives of the Constitution as the fundamental law of the Gambia. B, to educate and encourage the public to defend this Constitution against all forms of abuse and violence. C, to sensitize the people of proposed legislative measures published for public and expert opinion to enable the public to understand the issues and provide meaningful contributions. D, to educate and sensitize the public on key legislation that affects their lives and affairs as a mechanism for ensuring greater compliance with the laws. E, to formulate from time to time for the consideration of the government programs at national, constituency, and district levels aimed at realizing the objects of this Constitution. F, to formulate, implement, and oversee programs aimed at inculcating in the citizens of the Gambia awareness of their civic and fundamental rights, duties, and responsibilities. G, to raise awareness that service rendered by public officials and civic society are not in the nature of favors to the people, but rather as constitutional, legal, and civic responsibilities. H, to educate the citizens of the Gambia about international, regional, and sub-regional instruments and other matters relevant to the Gambia. And I, to perform such powers and other functions as an act of the National Assembly may provide. 2. An act of the National Assembly may provide for the establishment of district branches of the National Council for Civic Education. 3. In the exercise of its function, the National Council for Civic Education shall be non-partisan, and savers may be provided by an act of the National Assembly shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority. Chapter 19. Amendment of this Constitution. Amendment of this Constitution. 301. Subject to the provisions of this section, an act of the National Assembly may amend this Constitution. 2. This Constitution shall not be amended by an act of the National Assembly or altered, whether directly or indirectly, unless A, the sole purpose of the act is to amend this Constitution, B, The amendment or alteration is carried out transparently and openly, and the people have been 1. Duly informed about the proposed amendment or alteration and the objects and reasons for the amendment or alteration, and 2. Given ample opportunity to express their opinions on the proposed amendment or alteration. C. The amendment or alteration is necessary and in the best interest of the people of the Gambia. D. The Act is passed in accordance with this chapter. 3. An Act of the National Assembly shall not amend, add to, repeal, or in any other way alter any of the provisions of this Constitution unless the title of the Act clearly indicates that intention and the Act does so in express terms. 4. Subject to sections 103 and 1387 2 and 3, the National Assembly shall not have or exercise the power to amend the Constitution to extend the term of the presidency contrary to section 102. Amendment of entrenched provisions. 301(1). This section applies to the amendment of the following provisions of this Constitution, which are in this Constitution referred to as entrenched provisions. A. This chapter. B. Sections 1, 2, and 3, and 124(2), which relate to the Republic, sovereignty of the Gambia, and the territory of the Gambia. C. Sections 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, in brackets, which relate to the Constitution as the supreme law of the Gambia, national values, and good governance. D. Sections 13, 14, and 18(4), in brackets, which relate to citizenship. E. Chapter 6, which relates to the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms. F. Sections 73(1) and 3, 79, and 82, subsections 2G and 6, thereof which relate to elections, the independent boundaries and electoral commission and political parties. G. Sections 85, 88, Part 3 of Chapter 8, 100, 101, 102, 103, 105, 106, 108, 1, 109, 114, 117, 118, and 121(1), in brackets, which relate to election of president, qualifications for election of president, disqualifications for election of president, nomination of candidates, the term of office of president, the qualifications of ministers, and the establishment and composition of cabinet. H. Sections 124(2) and 5, 129(8), 9, and 10, and 213(2), in brackets, which relates to the Director of Public Prosecutions, the independence of independent institutions and offices, including the Auditor General and the Gambia's international relations. I. Sections 134(1) and 2, 135, 136, 137, 138, 142, and 151, which relate to the National Assembly and the legislative power. J. Sections 170, 171, 172, 1 and 2, 173, 1 and 2, Part 3 of Chapter 10, except Sections 180(2) and 7, 182(3), 185(3), and Sections 188, except subsection 3 and 192, in brackets, which relate to the judiciary. K. Sections 202, 204(3), 206, 207, and 209, in brackets, which relate to local government. L. Sections 222, 2241, 2381, 240, and 244, which relate to the office and powers of the Auditor General, taxation, and the withdrawal of money from public funds. M. Sections 256, 257, and 258, in brackets, which relate to the Land, Environment, and Natural Resources Commission and land holding by non-citizens. N. Section 263(3), in brackets, which relates to the security of tenure of the Secretary General. And O. Schedule 3, which relates to transitional provisions. 2. A bill for the amendment of an entrenched provision shall not be introduced into the National Assembly unless the bill A. is published in the Gazette for a period of 6 months, and B. complies with the requirements of Section 300, 2 and 3. 3. After the bill has been read the first time in the National Assembly, it shall not be proceeded with further unless A. the bill is submitted by the Speaker to the Independent Boundaries and Electoral Commission for a referendum to be held throughout the Gambia. B. At least 50% of the persons entitled to vote voted at the referendum, and C. At least 75% of the persons who voted cast their votes in favor of the passing of the bill. 4. Where the bill is approved at the referendum, the National Assembly shall pass it without any further amendment or other alteration. 5. Where a bill has been passed by the National Assembly in accordance with this section, the President shall assent to it. Amendment of non-entrenched provisions 302(1). A bill to amend a provision of this Constitution which is not an entrenched provision shall not be introduced into the National Assembly unless A. it has been published twice in the Gazette, with the second publication being made at least 3 months after the first. B. It complies with the requirements of Section 300, 2 and 3, and C. At least 14 days have passed after the second publication. 2. Where the National Assembly approves the bill, it may only be presented to the President for his assent if it was approved at the second and third readings in the National Assembly by the votes of not less than 2/3 of all members of the National Assembly. 3. Subject to Section 303, where the bill has been passed in accordance with this section, the President shall assent to it. Certificate of Compliance with the Constitution 303. A bill for the amendment or other alteration of this Constitution which has been passed in accordance with this Constitution shall not be assented to by the President unless A. it is accompanied by a certificate from the Speaker that the provisions of this Constitution have been complied with, and B. in the case of a bill to amend an entrenched provision, it is accompanied by a certificate from the Independent Boundaries and Electoral Commission, signed by the chairperson of the Commission and bearing the seal of the Commission that the bill was approved at a referendum in accordance with this chapter. Interpretation 304. In this chapter, A. References to this Constitution include references to any law that amends or replaces any of the provisions of this Constitution, and B. References to the alteration of this Constitution include references to the amendment, modification, or reenactment with or without amendment or modification of the Constitution or of any provision for the time being contained in this Constitution, the suspension or repeal or the making of different provision in lieu thereof, and the addition of new provisions to this Constitution. Chapter 20, Miscellaneous, Part 1, Appointments, Resignations, etc. Acting Appointments, 305(1). In this Constitution, unless a contrary intention appears, A. Any reference to a power of appointment to an office shall be construed as including a reference to the power to appoint a person to act in or perform the functions of that office. B. Any reference to the holder of an office by a term designating his or her office shall be construed as including a reference to any person for the time being lawfully acting in or performing the functions of that office. 2. Where in this Constitution power is vested in any person or authority to appoint any person to act in or perform the functions of any office if the holder thereof is himself or herself unable to perform those functions, no such appointment shall be called in question on the ground that the holder of the office was not able to perform those functions. Resignations 306(1). Any person who is appointed or elected to, or otherwise selected for, any office established by or under this Constitution may resign from that office by writing under his or her hand addressed to the person or authority by whom he or she was appointed, elected, or selected. 2. For the purposes of subsection 1, A. In the case of the President, his or her resignation shall be addressed to the Speaker and the Chief Justice. B. In the case of the Vice President or a Minister, his or her resignation shall be addressed to the President. C. In the case of the Speaker or a Deputy Speaker, his or her resignation shall be addressed to the Clerk of the National Assembly. D. In the case of the Chief Justice, a Supreme Court Judge, or Court of Appeal Judge, his or her resignation shall be addressed to the President. D. In the case of a member of the National Assembly, his or her resignation shall be addressed to the Speaker. And E. In any other case, his or her resignation shall be addressed to the person or authority that appointed him or her. 3. Any such resignation shall take effect when no date is specified when the writing is received. A. In the case of the President, by the Speaker and the Chief Justice. B. In any other case, by the person or authority to whom it is addressed, or by any person authorized by that person or authority to receive it. Reappointments and concurrent appointments. 307. 1. Subject to the provisions of this Constitution, where a person has vacated any office established by or under the Constitution, he or she may, if qualified, again be appointed, elected, or otherwise selected to hold that office in accordance with the provisions of this Constitution. 2. Where, by this Constitution, a power is conferred on any person or authority to make any appointment to any public office, a person may be appointed to that office, notwithstanding that some other person may be holding that office when that person is on leave of absence, pending relinquishment of the office. 3. Where two or more persons are holding the same office by reason of any appointment made in pursuance of this section, then, for the purposes of any function conferred on the holder of that office, the person last appointed shall be deemed to be the holder of the office. Duty to provide reasons for adverse decisions. 308. 1. Where an adverse decision is taken against a person in the public service, irrespective of the nature or form of the adverse decision, the person who takes the adverse decision has a duty to inform the person against whom the adverse decision is taken of the reasons or reasons for the adverse decision. 2. The reason or reasons for the adverse decision taken shall be in writing addressed to the person against whom the adverse decision is taken. 3. Subsections 1 and 2 do not apply to any adverse decision taken by the President in respect of an appointment to the Cabinet, the Office of Chief of Staff, and the Office of Chief of Defence Staff of the Armed Forces of the Gambia. Duty not to act on an unlawful directive. 309. No power exercised or an order given on the basis of an executive directive issued by any person or authority shall be inconsistent with this Constitution or any other law, and any directive issued in that regard shall not be acted upon by any person if the directive is so inconsistent. Power to legislate for and publish matters in this Constitution. 310. 1. Without prejudice to any provision in this Constitution empowering the National Assembly to enact legislation for specific purposes, the National Assembly may enact such other legislation as is necessary to give effect to the provisions of this Constitution. 2. Where under this Constitution or an act of the National Assembly any matter or action is required to be published in the Gazette, such matter or action may, in addition to publication in the Gazette, also be published in the print, online, and broadcast media. Part 2. General. Interpreting this Constitution. 311. This Constitution shall be interpreted in a manner that A. Promotes its purposes, values, and guiding principles. B. Advances the rule of law and the fundamental rights and freedoms enshrined in Chapter 6. C. permits the development of the law. D. Contributes to governance. E. Promotes and protects the sovereignty of the people of the Gambia. And F. Is cognizant of the historical, social, cultural, political, and spiritual context that necessitated the adoption of this constitution. Interpretation 312. 1. In this constitution, unless a contrary intention appears, all the members in relation to the National Assembly means all the members for the time being of the National Assembly. An act of the National Assembly includes an act of parliament established under any previous constitution of the Gambia. Compulsory retirement age has the meaning ascribed to it in section 267. Court means any court mentioned or established under section 173. Disciplined force means the police force, the prison service, the immigration service, the drug law enforcement agency of the Gambia, the fire and rescue service, the state intelligence service, the customs wing of the Gambia Revenue Authority, and the armed forces, and includes any other force established by an act of the National Assembly. Existing laws means the laws in force in the Gambia immediately before the coming into force of this constitution, other than any such laws which are repealed or revoked on or immediately before the coming into force of this constitution. Gazette means the official gazette of the government. Government means the executive government of the Gambia. High Judicial Office means the office of a judge of a court of unlimited jurisdiction in criminal, civil, and Sharia matters, or of a court with jurisdiction on appeal from such a court in some part of the Commonwealth or such other country as the National Assembly may prescribe. Judge includes the Chief Justice and other judges of the Supreme Court, a judge of the Court of Appeal, a judge of the High Court, and a judge of the Sharia High Court. Legal practitioner means a person entitled to practice as such in accordance with an act of the National Assembly. Local government authority means a city, council, a municipality, or an area council. Minister includes the Attorney General. Oath includes affirmation. Ordinarily resident, unless the context indicates otherwise, means being resident in any part of the Gambia permanently or for a specified period, or being a citizen by birth, residing outside the Gambia for an extended period, but occasionally, not more than 1 year apart, visiting the Gambia during the period of residence outside the Gambia. Prescribed oaths means such oaths as may be prescribed in this constitution or by an act of the National Assembly in respect of the relevant office, and if no such oath is prescribed, means an oath of allegiance to the Gambia. Public elections means the election for a president, National Assembly, or a local government council. Public office includes an office the emoluments of which are paid directly from the Consolidated Revenue Fund or directly out of monies provided by an act of the National Assembly, and the office of a member of a local government authority or the staff of a statutory body or state-owned enterprise. Public officer means a person holding an office in the public service, a person in the service of a local government authority, and a person in the service of a statutory body or state-owned enterprise. The public service means subject to section 22(3), a service declared to be or established as a public service by or under the section in which it is declared or established. Session means the sitting of the National Assembly of the Gambia commencing when it first meets after a general election or after the adjournment of a session, and ending when the session is adjourned or the National Assembly stands dissolved. State-owned enterprise means a body corporate, wholly or partially owned or controlled by the government, directly or indirectly, and includes any other body or institution specified as such in an act of the National Assembly. And superior court, in relation to the courts of the Gambia, means the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, the High Court, and the Sharia High Court. 2. In this Constitution, unless a contrary intention appears, A. Words importing natural persons shall include corporations. B. Words in the singular shall include the plural, and words in the plural shall include the singular. C. Where a word is defined Other parts of speech and tenses of that word shall have the corresponding meaning. D. Words directing or empowering a public officer to do any act or thing otherwise applying to him or her by the designation of his or her office shall include his or her other successors in office. And E. References to a subsection, paragraph, subparagraph, or item shall be construed as a reference to a subsection, paragraph, subparagraph, or item of the section in which the reference occurs. 3. For the purposes of this Constitution, a person shall not be regarded as holding an office of emolument under the government or in the service of the Gambia by reason only that he or she is in receipt of a pension or other like benefit in respect of service in an office under the government, a local government authority, or a statutory body or state-owned enterprise. 4. For the avoidance of doubt, it is hereby declared that any reference in this Constitution to the function of the President includes reference to his or her functions as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Gambia. Construction of various powers, 313(1), where any power is conferred by this Constitution to make any proclamation, order, regulation, rule, code of conduct, or pass any resolution, or give any directive, or make any declaration or designation, it shall be deemed to include the power exercisable in like manner and subject to like conditions, if any, to amend or revoke the same. 2. Where any power is conferred by this Constitution on any person or authority to do or enforce the doing of any act or thing, all such powers shall be deemed to be also given as are necessary to enable that person or authority to do or enforce the doing of that act or thing. 3. No provision of this Constitution that any person or authority shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority in exercising any functions in this Constitution shall be construed as precluding a court from exercising jurisdiction in relation to any question whether or not such person or authority has performed those functions in accordance with this Constitution or any other law. 4. Where under any provision of this Constitution any person or authority is authorized or required to exercise any function after consultation with any other person or authority, the person or authority first referred to shall not be required to act in accordance with the advice of that person or authority. 5. Without prejudice to the provisions of Section 165, but subject to the other provisions of this Constitution, the power to make any appointment to a public office includes the power to dismiss any person so appointed. Transitional and consequential provisions, 315. Notwithstanding any other provisions of this Constitution, the provisions of Schedule 3 shall have effect on the coming into force of this Constitution. Repeal, 316(1). Subject to subsection 2, the Constitution of the Gambia 1997 is hereby repealed. 2. The Constitution comes into force 1 day after its adoption at a referendum. 3. The Supreme Court shall have jurisdiction to hear all matters that may pertain to the transition from the repealed Constitution to this Constitution. Schedule 1. Administrative areas of the Gambia: 1. Banjul, 2. Kanifing, 3. Brikama, 4. Kerewan, 5. Mansakonko, 6. Janjambore, 7. Basse. Schedule 2. Constituencies for National Assembly elections. For purposes of election to the National Assembly, the members shall be elected from the following constituencies. A. 53 persons from single-member constituencies as demarcated by the Independent Boundaries and Electoral Commission. B. 14 women, 2 elected from each administrative area. And C. 2 persons elected by persons with disabilities from amongst the members of the Federation representing such persons. Schedule 3. Transitional and consequential provisions. Interpretation. 1. In this schedule, effective date means the date of the coming into force of this Constitution, which shall be the date after the day this Constitution is adopted at a national referendum, and existing means in being, or current, or as the case may be, having the force of law or being in operation immediately before the coming into force of this Constitution. Existing laws. 2. 1. Subject to the provisions of this Constitution, all laws that were in force immediately before the effective date shall, on the effective date, continue to be in force with such modifications, adaptations, qualifications, and exceptions as may be necessary to bring such laws into conformity with this Constitution. 2. Subject to subsection 3, where any matter that falls to be prescribed or provided for under this Constitution by an act of the National Assembly or by any other person or authority is prescribed or provided for by or under an existing law or is otherwise lawfully prescribed or provided for immediately before the effective date, that prescription or provision shall, as from the effective date, have effect with such modifications, adaptations, qualifications, and exceptions as may be necessary to bring it into conformity with this Constitution. 3. If in respect of any particular matter, any existing law assigned responsibility for that particular matter to a specific person or authority, and this Constitution, upon the effective date, assigns that responsibility to a different person or authority, the assignment under this Constitution shall prevail. 4. Where an existing law had not been brought into force before, or was to come into force on a date subsequent to the coming into force of this Constitution, the law may be brought into force in accordance with its terms, or it shall come into force on such subsequent date, as the case may be, in so far as it is not inconsistent with this Constitution. 5. The National Assembly shall, within 3 years of the coming into force of this Constitution, make such provision as may be necessary to repeal, amend, or adapt any existing law not partly or wholly consistent with this Constitution to bring the existing law into conformity with the provisions of this Constitution. Rights, duties, and obligations. 3. Except where this Constitution provides otherwise, all rights, duties, and obligations, however arising of the government or the state and subsisting immediately before the effective date shall continue as rights, duties, and obligations of the government or the state under this Constitution. The Executive. 4.1. The existing executive shall, from the effective date, continue as the executive of the Gambia for the purposes of this Constitution. 2. The office of Chief of Staff of the President's office may, after the effective date, be filled in accordance with the provisions of this Constitution, but the person appointed to that office shall serve only for the unexpired period of the term of the incumbent President. 3. The existing office of Secretary General as head of the civil service shall, from the effective date, continue as if it were established under this Constitution, and all the provisions of this Constitution relating to that office shall apply. 4. The existing office of Secretary to Cabinet shall, from the effective date, continue as if it were established under this Constitution, and all the provisions of this Constitution relating to that office shall apply. Term of office of incumbent President. 5.1. The person duly elected President of the Gambia prior to the effective date and serving in office as at the effective date shall be the first President of the Third Republic of the Gambia and shall be deemed to hold the office of President in accordance with the provisions of this Constitution. 2. Notwithstanding anything contained in this Constitution or any other law or any rule of interpretation or rule of construction, the term of office of the person holding the office of President as at the effective date shall be construed to include the existing term, and the person may contest the election for the presidency for only one more term as provided in this Constitution after the expiry of the existing term. Disclosure of assets, etc. 6. Where a person, by virtue of the office he or she holds, is required to make a disclosure of assets, liabilities, or business interest, whether of himself or herself, and the person had not, under any existing law, made such disclosure before the effective date, the person shall make the disclosure required under this Constitution within 3 months after the effective date, or if the Anti-Corruption Commission has not commenced its work by then, within 3 months after the commencement of work by the Commission. The National Assembly, 7.1. The existing National Assembly shall from the effective date continue as the National Assembly of the Gambia for the purposes of this Constitution. 2. The existing constituencies shall, from the effective date, continue to be single-member constituencies for purposes of elections to the National Assembly until such time as the number is altered by the Independent Boundaries and Electoral Commission in accordance with this Constitution. 3. The expanded membership of the National Assembly shall take effect, and the members thereof shall only be voted for at the next general elections after the expiry of the term of the existing National Assembly. 4. The existing offices of the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader of the National Assembly shall, from the effective date, continue as such in accordance with the provisions of this Constitution. 5. The office of a second Deputy Speaker at the National Assembly shall not, if established, be filled until after the next National Assembly has been elected and its members sworn into office. 6. The authority of the National Assembly established under Section 111 of the repealed Constitution shall, from the effective date, continue as such without alteration in the mode of appointment of its members until after the next National Assembly has been elected and its members sworn in as members of the National Assembly Service Commission. Term and language of the National Assembly. 8.1. Notwithstanding Section 138 relating to the term of the National Assembly and pursuant to Section 1371, the term of the existing National Assembly shall come to an end at the same time as that of the existing President, and, accordingly, the existing National Assembly shall stand dissolved on the day immediately before a general election of members of the Assembly following dissolution. 2. The provision under Section 1551 for the business of the National Assembly to be conducted in any other language apart from the English language shall not take effect before the next general election following the dissolution of the existing National Assembly. Convening of next National Assembly and standing orders. 9.1. The power conferred on the clerk of the National Assembly to convene the first sitting of the National Assembly shall apply with effect from the next National Assembly that is elected after general elections. 2. The existing standing orders of the National Assembly shall, in so far as they are not inconsistent with this Constitution, constitute the standing orders of the National Assembly until revoked, amended, or otherwise revised by the Assembly. The Judiciary. 10.1. The existing judiciary and the courts constituted thereunder, save the Special Criminal Court, shall, from the effective date, continue as such for the purposes of this Constitution. 2. If on the effective date a matter on which legal proceedings were commenced before an existing court relates to an interpretation or application of a provision of the repealed Constitution, the matter shall be resolved in accordance with the provisions of the repealed Constitution. Judges. 11.1. The judges of the existing superior courts shall be deemed to have the requisite qualification for appointment as prescribed in this Constitution, and in that regard to have been properly appointed in accordance with this Constitution. 2. Where, on the effective date, a non-Gambian is appointed to and holds the office of judge of a superior court, he or she shall be deemed to have been appointed in accordance with Section 1883 of the Constitution and may therefore continue to hold office in accordance with the terms of his or her appointment. Local government authorities. 12.1. The existing local government authorities and their geographical boundaries shall, on the effective date, continue as such. 2. The term of office for which existing members of the local government authorities have been elected shall continue to be in force, and the term established under this Constitution shall only come into effect following the next local government elections after the effective date. 3. Where, before the effective date, a person was elected or appointed as a Seifu or an Alcalo, he or she shall, from the effective date, continue to serve in such office as prescribed in this Constitution. Electoral boundaries. 13.1. The existing constituency boundaries shall continue to have effect after the effective date until otherwise determined by the Independent Boundaries and Electoral Commission pursuant to Section 81. 2. For purposes of Section 81(2), the period at which the Independent Boundaries and Electoral Commission may review the names and boundaries of constituencies after the effective date shall be reckoned from the date of publication of the last national census results before the effective date. Existing offices. 14.1. Subject to this paragraph and other provisions of this schedule, where any office has been established by or under an existing law, and this Constitution establishes or provides for the establishment of the same, or a similar or corresponding office, any person who, immediately before the effective date, holds or is acting in the former office shall, in so far as it is consistent with this Constitution, be deemed as from the effective date to have been appointed, elected, or otherwise selected to act in the latter office. 2. For the purposes of subparagraph 1, where this Constitution prescribes a qualification for an existing office which the current holder of the office does not possess, the current holder of the office shall, notwithstanding any qualifications or disqualifications attached to the office, continue in such office as if he or she satisfied the requirements to hold such office in accordance with the terms of his or her office. 3. Any person who, under the existing law, would have been required to vacate his or her office at the expiration of any period or on the attainment of any age shall vacate such office on the expiry of that period or on the attainment of that age. 4. Nothing in this paragraph affects the power of any person or authority under this Constitution to make provision for the abolition of any office or the removal of any person from office or to require any person to retire from office. 5. For the purposes of any law relating to pensions or other retirement benefits, the continuity of service of any person holding a public office shall not be affected by the coming into force of this Constitution. Service Commissions. 15.1. Subject to subparagraph 2, the existing National Assembly Service, Judicial Service Commission, and Public Service Commission shall, on the effective date, continue to function as such. 2. Within a period of 6 months after the effective date, the Secretary General shall take all necessary steps to ensure the establishment of the Teachers Service Commission, Health Service Commission, and Security Service Commission as provided in this Constitution, and the Public Service Commission shall, after that period, cease to perform the functions assigned to those service commissions under this Constitution. Independent institutions and offices. 16. Subject to subsection 2, the functions of the Director of Public Prosecutions shall be performed by the Attorney General until a Director of Public Prosecutions is appointed in accordance with this Constitution. 2. The Attorney General shall not continue to perform the functions of the Director of Public Prosecutions for a period exceeding 9 months after the effective date. 3. Subject to subsection 4, the Ombudsperson may perform those functions of the Anti-Corruption Commission as it has jurisdiction over prior to the effective date until the Anti-Corruption Commission is appointed. 4. The Ombudsperson shall not continue to perform the functions of the Anti-Corruption Commission for a period exceeding 9 months after the effective date. 5. Where, prior to the effective date, the holder of an independent office was appointed on a fixed term, the holder of the office shall, from the effective date, continue to serve for the period remaining on the fixed term, and thereafter, if he or she is entitled to a renewal of appointment, The renewal of appointment shall be made in accordance with this Constitution. Commission for Implementation of the Constitution, 17.1. There is established the Constitution Implementation Commission, in brackets, the Commission, which shall have responsibility for the implementation of the provisions of this Commission. 2. The Commission shall comprise a chairperson appointed by the National Assembly by a vote of not less than 60% of all members of the Assembly, and b. 4 other members, at least 2 of whom shall be women. 3. The chairperson and other members of the Commission shall be persons of high moral character and proven integrity who, a. are qualified in public law, human rights, public administration and government with post-qualification experience of not less than 15 years, and b. shall not include any person who had served on the Constitutional Review Commission appointed pursuant to the Constitutional Review Commission Act 2017. 4. The provisions of Part 1 of Chapter 12 shall apply to the Commission to ensure its independence and effective functioning. 5. The Commission shall perform the following functions. A. To monitor, facilitate, and oversee the development of legislation and administrative procedures required for the implementation of this Constitution. B. To provide necessary assistance, including providing expert advice to any person or authority which has responsibility for ensuring the efficient and effective establishment of any commission, independent institution, or other office established under this Constitution. C. To coordinate with the Attorney General the preparation and introduction in the National Assembly legislation required to implement this Constitution. D. To report on a periodic basis to the National Assembly Constitutional Implementation Oversight Committee on progress in the implementation and any impediments to the implementation of this Constitution. And E. To work with each commission or other independent office established under this Constitution to ensure that the letter and spirit of this Constitution is respected. 6. The Commission's mandate under this paragraph shall, unless otherwise extended by the National Assembly, come to an end after a period of 3 years following its establishment. 7. Any extension to the period in which the Commission may continue to perform its mandate shall not, in aggregate, exceed 3 years. Establishment of National Assembly Select Committee. 18.1. The National Assembly shall, in accordance with its standing orders and within 30 days after the date of adoption of this Constitution at a referendum, establish a Select Committee on Constitution Implementation Oversight Committee, in brackets, the Committee. 2. The committee's function shall be to oversee the implementation of this Constitution, and in that regard shall a. liaise regularly with the Constitution Implementation Commission established under paragraph 17 to ensure that the Commission is carrying out its mandate as prescribed in that paragraph. B. Receive periodic reports from the Commission on the implementation of the Constitution, including reports relating to 1. The preparation of the legislation required by this Constitution. 2. The process of establishing the commissions and independent institutions and other offices required under this Constitution. 3. The process of establishing the infrastructure necessary for the proper management of the commissions and independent institutions and offices. 4. The decentralization of powers and functions to the local government authorities as provided in this Constitution and any act of the National Assembly giving effect to this Constitution in that regard. And 5. The challenges to the process of implementing this Constitution, providing recommendations on how those challenges may be properly addressed. C. Coordinate with the Attorney General, the Commission, and relevant select committees of the National Assembly to ensure the timely introduction and enactment of legislation required by this Constitution. And D. Take necessary action on the reports received under paragraph B, including addressing any problems in the implementation of this Constitution. Financial support to the Commission. 19. The National Assembly shall, upon the establishment of the Commission referred to in paragraph 17, and for each subsequent year thereafter while the Commission remains established, provide adequate funding to the Commission to enable the Commission to effectively and efficiently carry out its functions. Commissions of Inquiry. 20. 1. Where prior to the effective date a commission of inquiry was issued under the repealed Constitution or any other law, A. The commission of inquiry shall continue to exist and shall exercise its powers and perform its functions in accordance with the repealed Constitution and the commission establishing it. And B. Any finding, order, or recommendation by the commission of inquiry shall be dealt with in accordance with the repealed Constitution and the Commission establishing it. Enforcement of other provisions of this Constitution. 21. Save as otherwise specified in this schedule, all other provisions of this Constitution take effect from the day after the date of adoption of this Constitution at a referendum.